Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing YouTube channel. And if you've spent a second here, you will know that this is all about helping you, supporting you to be more successful in your business. So what you will find on this channel is me giving you everything I know about marketing, sales and marketing, because that's the only way I know for you to be more successful. It will include people, anyone I can find who will share their knowledge and experience on marketing. And it will include the marketing news. So the marketing news, because Ionut is having a baby, we are joined this week by Melanie, who is Concierge of Co-creation at Crazy Might Work. And she's here this week to talk to us about the news. Good afternoon, Melanie. You're looking very wistfully out of the window at the rain washing away Australia.
Yes, if anyone's following our tiny bit of news compared to world news, but yes, we're all underwater. It looks like a war zone here, but it isn't. So we're grateful for the little things.
Grateful for the little things like not being washed away. Yes.
And, community spirit and all of that, that's been incredible. But yes, the whole east coast of Australia is awash, and 8,000 houses have been condemned. So you can imagine the knock-on effect of that for people, and it's a difficult, sad time.
100%. So condemned, permanently condemned, they won't be livable anymore. Is that condemned?
Correct. Condemned, as in they've got to be knocked down. There's nothing safe about the foundations, even washed away in many cases.
Oh my God. Okay. And so many, many more people have also been evacuated, have they?
Yes. Yes, hundreds of thousands across up and down the country. And I think really it's early days. That those 8,000 houses, it only took a day for that assessment to come back. So they're continuing to assess thousands of houses over the coming days. So we expect that number to rise. But it's pretty scary.
It is pretty scary, yeah. And Australia really seems to have been through it recently in terms of weird weather and natural disaster events. It seems at the beginning of every year you get something shitty happen, is the way it feels from here.
Yeah, we like to keep current with, the latest weather disaster.
Yes.
On the upside, we have some incredible researchers and academics, that I love science and who are doing extraordinary things around earthquake, fire and flood, prevention, prediction, all of that. And really the investment in prevention is the thing that has made the difference. Although there's more when underwater, for example, one of the worst affected towns, that flood, that would have flooded really at 9-10 meters. So it was a 12-meter flood was the record. This flood was 14 meters. So the flood defences have and the investment in those, as much as this has been a complete disaster, it's been saved from multiple floods over the last decade because the floods would have come up to 12 meters and everybody was fine.
Yes.
And previously, in the 80s, in that area, things were going underwater and boats travelling down the main street of the town almost every year. So the upside of it is how community responds, how science responds, how government and policymakers respond to that. So it's an exciting time in some way, and it's devastating. But just the lessons from this, and really I hope that triggers more investment in these defences and the science that has led to the recommendations around those.
Yes. What a truly Australian response that was. It's like the whole world is getting washed away, but we're learning from this. And what did I want to say? And the community response has been amazing, you were saying.
Yeah, really incredible. Like, I think not to diminish the role of the Australian Defence Force in the cleanup operation, the people on the ground, and really a shout out to many of the sort of Samoan and Polynesian communities up in that area who've been singing their hearts out in typical kind of Polynesian style in the community evacuation centres, keeping spirits high, getting in their own boats, taking themselves up the river to rescue people. In fact, on the worst day, there's a photograph of hundreds of boats, a flotilla of boats, all community boats, almost all community boats, going to rescue neighbours. And so it's an inspiring response, and just thousands of people flocking to the area with water, with clothes, food, to just help. And white goods. Somebody posted, I'm giving a car to a family of 3. So if you are a family of 3, you've got 3 kids, you can have my Tarago. So people just donating incredible things to share the loss effectively.
Yes. It is incredible what happens. There's always incredible things happening when incredibly bad things are happening. I think that gives me always much more faith in humankind. Okay, good. We're not here to talk about that really important news. We're here to talk about the much less important news. That is the news that is happening in the world of marketing. Something that Ionut likes to do at the beginning is he always likes to have a little boast if he's achieved something amazing in the 2 weeks since we've spoken. I don't know if you want to continue that tradition. Have you? I don't ever achieve anything amazing, so I'm not going to get involved. Have you achieved something amazing in the last 2 weeks that you want to share with the world?
The pressure. Well, look, I'm really excited about this Friday. We're kicking off a cross-industry collaboration, and in terms of the marketing win, I guess we've had several referrals from clients, which is always nice. But we've managed to really use LinkedIn effectively to secure interest, to a point where we can successfully run that.
Okay.
And so it's a system-wide response to the COP26 goals and what that means for Australia and what it means for businesses in Australia. But we've assembled government, industry and researchers from universities together in the room. So we'll have several teams co-creating innovative solutions to really climate events. So very timely for us, but sustainability in general in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like something you should be very proud of. Sounds much more impressive than anything that Ionut has achieved so far.
we'll have to
I can tell you that because he is having a baby, so he's probably not ever going to see this. Is the truth. Okay, cool. So the format is really simple. You have tried to break the format already, but I have stood firm. The format is you bring 3 news stories, I bring 3 news stories, we discuss the news stories, then we get on with our lives. So you have tried to give me like heads up of what your news stories are. I've ignored it. I don't know what your news stories are. So I have struggled a little bit. I don't think my news stories are particularly exciting. I imagine your news stories are going to be much more exciting. But you could tell us what's kind of caught your eye or you caught your attention in the marketing news recently.
So I guess as a segue from the floods, the response from brands when there's a disaster, that is very topical right now with the Ukraine globally, but also with the flood disasters in Australia. And we have seen there's a couple of brands who've pledged that they will give $1 for every item that they sell in their store to a charity.
Okay.
And the backlash is really interesting to watch on that.
Okay, cool. All right, so just the headlines at this stage, and then we'll come back into it. We'll prioritize and we come back to it. Yes. So that's one story: is how brands should behave in a crisis.
Yes. The second is the opportunity for Facebook as opposed to the downfall of Facebook.
Okay.
Because I think there's some interesting pivots that they can do, and they might be secretly doing those things.
Okay, that's good. Excellent. So the opportunity for, I'm dying to see Facebook fail. You've seen these news, haven't you? I'm dying to see it fail. Okay, so the opportunity for Facebook, that's cool. Story number 2. And story number 3?
Yeah, I'm interested in neuroscience with our future skills.
Okay. This has gone to a whole different level with you being here as opposed to Ionut. Okay, which I knew it would. It's cool. It's really cool. I'm excited about that. Okay, so that's 3 quite strong news stories. Mine are much less strong. There is a thing being reported in Global Citizen. How does your social media use impact the planet? Use this calculator to find out. So this is something that's kind of been brewing. Lots of these young environmentalists are on their phones complaining about the world ending in 2030, not realizing the effect of that. I've got a Facebook thing. Facebook, here's the headline, a massive, on Mashable, a massive Facebook redesign just went live for me, and it's not great, is what they're saying about that. And then I've got two stories which are kind of the same thing, which is there's been some movement on the search engine algorithms. And the one that's happened right now is what they're calling the desktop rollout. So it's page experience updates for desktop rollouts. So my three stories, environmental impact of social media, new skin for Facebook, and things happening on the search engines. Let's go with yours first about catastrophe marketing, disaster marketing.
Yeah. So my observation with that is that there's a desire to do good, to be seen, to do good. We know that actually, statistically, 70% of people under 30 will not work for an organization who is not transparently sustainable.
What was the percentage, sorry?
70%.
70. 7 out of 10 people under 30 will not work for a business that is not visibly sustainable.
Correct.
Whoa, that's actual data.
Yeah. Now, and I can send you the link on that. It's pretty. Now, that's fine, and as long as you're not hoping to target that audience, which of course most of us are.
Yes.
And so if we are not transparently sustainable, we're in trouble in the recruitment of talent war, if you call it that. Now, if you put that alongside the fact that brands are trying to be sustainable and trying to be seen to be helpful, there's a minefield to walk through with that, because they will be called to account by your Joe Blow on the street. So I know of this one brand who's donating $1 for every item they sell in their retail clothing store, but they're donating it to a charity. So there's been questions asked about that charity, and it's the quality of that charity, and the transparency of the charity in doing good. So is the money actually going to get to the right place because they've picked the wrong charity? That's the message. And the second thing is that they're making profit. They're being seen to be making profit out of disaster by saying, that means we have to buy clothes in your store in order for you to donate. Why don't you just give them money?
Yes.
So making profit out of disaster doesn't seem to be hitting the mark, particularly, I would imagine, for the under 30s who are very much driven by transparently sustainable and good corporate behaviour.
Yes.
That's why don't make profit is the first rule. And probably I wonder if brands are reading their values first to question, what has this got to do with us? Because I think if it's not exactly our wheelhouse, it can kind of be a bit distracting. Like, why is this brand weighing in on this? But it's not to diminish their efforts. It's sad to think that they'd get, ripped apart by consumers for giving in a time of disaster. But that's what seems to be happening.
Whoa! I mean, this is a landmine, isn't it? It's like, I mean, we're operating in this cancel culture. This is stuff that Ionut never wants to talk about, but it seems to me that 2022 has to be the year where brands get cancelled because everyone else has been cancelled already. Do you know what I mean? There's things going on in the world. I mean, a number of things occurred to me. Like last week, I did the news with Ionut. Ionut is from Romania, which borders Ukraine. His wife is from Moldova, which borders Ukraine. Moldova, apparently, if this is a huge expansion move by Russia, is the next place that will be attacked. And then we had to talk about the marketing news. You are in a country that's busy getting washed away, and here we are talking about the marketing news. So, like, these things are going on, and we have to continue. Do you know what I mean? The world continues to go on, so they have to continue selling their clothes in the shops. They have to. So it's almost like how you can't ignore it because that is ignorant. Do you know what I mean? So you have to do something, and then what is the right thing? And it's almost like at the beginning of the pandemic, like I'm going to swear, I don't like to swear, but I'm like, what the fuck do I say? Like, on behalf of my clients, what the fuck do I say? Like, essentially, populations are being locked in their homes because there is this pandemic going on. Now, do people really want to buy, I don't know, metal? Turns out they did, one of my clients. But do people really want to buy pumps? No, was the answer.
For work?
Yeah.
For the office?
Yeah. So it's like pumps these were mechanical pumps for industry. So it's like these major events are happening in the world. How do you respond as a marketer? Like your primary function is to generate awareness, inquiries, sales, profits, so that's your primary function. But everyone has been pulled into like a media type role where they're also addressing an audience all the time. I think this is a minefield. And I think your stat about the 70% of people under 30, like, what is visibly sustainable? It's like, because there's no truth in anything we're experiencing anymore. So like, it's almost like immediately you decide, okay, that thing has happened, then or already it hasn't happened. So like my story about the environmental impact of social media is huge. So what, are digital marketing companies not sustainable, not visibly sustainable? Like, Lord help me. Like, you solve complicated problems. Solve that one. Riddle me that.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to what's important to you, I think. Like, I mean, looking at, I do think this is sort of nudging towards my other subject about future skills, but understanding about crisis response. So over time, government have increased the roles of crisis response and invested significantly more in the last 20 years in Australia anyway. Yep. They've a lot more in crisis response research and prevention and all of that. So there are a lot more roles available in that world. So I think in parallel, if disasters like flood, fire, pandemics are upon us and are going to increase, which is not a surprise to anyone, or not to be a surprise, what does that mean for brands? Where is their crisis response operative who's able to be ready? And by the way, we also had major cybersecurity attacks last year in Australia. So there was a lot of companies affected by that. So it can be a multitude of disasters, but what is the brand response to that? Like, how do we maintain our identity and double down on our values as a brand without risking the backlash from the cynical amongst us about our intentions?
Yes.
So it's trying to be authentic in our messaging.
Yes. So because I'm hands up, I am the cynical amongst us. So I don't know if you've seen, but there is, in response to what's happening in Ukraine, there are memes going around saying that the quickest way to get money to Ukraine is to book an Airbnb that you've got no intention. Obviously, no one's going to go and occupy. And it seems to me, firstly, there's two things about that. First thing is, people who have spare properties that they rent out on Airbnb, in my experience, aren't the most needy people in society. So there's that. But then also there's the benefit for Airbnb. And it's like, So now, whether Airbnb have seeded this idea or not, if they have, grossly cynical, they shouldn't have done that. If they haven't, now that someone there has got to respond. Do you know what I mean? And what is the response? You know, it's yeah, and I would say this isn't just about disaster response. We can keep it just about disaster response if you like, but it's also response in changes in attitudes. So we spoke a few weeks ago about M&Ms going woke, you know, because now they have to have an anxious M&M and they have to have a gender curious M&M who wears flat shoes now as opposed to high heels. So this, I think, is a minefield. I did warn you it's a minefield, you know?
I love minefields though, because that's when you get to have those really rich, juicy discussions. And it's not like I necessarily have the answers, but I think it's really interesting in terms of what that means for the future, how what prepared looks like. Because we can have a marketing plan, and then a pandemic hits. So whatever our plan was, if we're not actually agile, then we go under, and the best can go under. No matter how good your plan is, if it's not agile, then you're just going to be disappearing. And the person who had the brand that did have it together and did have people thinking about emergency response and were ready with what if this, that, the other. Sorry. The other thing is about consulting during a crisis. What do people think about what if we do this, what if we do that? Because I think sometimes it can happen a bit too quickly. The timing is incredibly delicate. I mean, I just think in many ways it would be better to do nothing and say nothing. But then if you've got the opportunity to give, you of course I think that's amazing. And then why wouldn't you want to just do it and say I don't care? We have to. We have a responsibility to do this. But it's actually saying, who do we need to ask about our idea of what we're going to say? Who do we have to have check our copy? Who represents the cynical amongst us, for example, and say, have we got this message right? Is there another way that we could have pursued this? Would it be better if we just donated a chunk of money? Because the other thing was, this is not for you, you should have given more, and it will never be enough.
Yes. I mean, this is what occurred to me about the Airbnb thing, is how actually useful, I mean, it may have nothing to do with Airbnb, but how actually useful is that? So when do they actually receive the money? What commission do they take? How do they receive the money? All of these things. And actually, in a war zone, is money really what you need? Are people still going to the shops and buying things? I don't know. I really don't know. But the other thing that occurs to me in the way that you're framing this and the way the world's gone in the last 3 years, I mean, take your experience you're on the east coast of Australia, 2020, was that the fires?
1920, yes.
1920?
Not 2019 December. They
2019, yes. So 19 to 20. So December, January, huge forest fires. March, pandemic. Like you say, last year, cyber attacks. This year, floods. So it's almost like it's becoming, being a marketer is disaster response in Australia. Like in huge inflation, like it's. I'm sorry?
That might be why I'm accidentally framing it that way, to say that but I mean, I think globally we can expect more disasters. It's when and how brands might want to respond, and what are the rules for response. It's really interesting how the New South Wales Police, who have an incredible brand, very trusted, and there's been a journey for them to have that transformation as a trusted brand. The New South Wales Police have a Facebook page worth checking out, which is very humorous. Their brand is funny. So, for example, in the pandemic, they posted on Facebook, which I think is amusing. And you can see the audience, they're trying to hit the young, the youth of today, whatever. But they said, going to see your drug dealer is not an excuse to break your curfew in a pandemic. So obviously they'd pulled someone over and they'd said, oh, I've got to see my drug dealer, so it's an emergency. I've got to leave the house. So they're kind of just teasing and saying, just kind of posting on Facebook all of the ridiculous excuses that people have given for leaving their house during a lockdown, and visiting my mistress and all of this sort of thing, right? So they're just posting those things, and so that people are getting the message, but also kind of having a laugh, and it was affecting people's behaviour positively.
Yes.
Because we're thinking we want to be that person,
Yes,
they're kind of making out that anyone who breaks lockdown is a fool, as opposed to saying, is a rule breaker, because we kind of like the idea of breaking rules, particularly here in Australia. So the way they framed it is actually the smart people are not leaving their house during lockdown. It's only the fools who are doing that.
Yes. And that is the key, I think, to effective social media marketing, is to be able to read the room and be funny and kind of skew the message. Do you know what I mean? So people have to think about it a little bit. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. I want to grab my phone because I got a meme yesterday that's relevant to what we're talking about. It's only here. I'm going to be about 8 seconds, okay? But people are going to see that I'm wearing shorts.
I will talk amongst myself.
So this is the meme that I got yesterday. It's not really a meme so much as it's I'm going to need to buy a new phone. It's a disaster. It's 3 years old. It's really not charging. It's really not loading up very quickly. Okay, so WhatsApp. Yeah, I think this is becoming the gig. And I think it kind of is that, isn't it? It is... Okay, so here's the meme. Russia has already been cut off from CNN, Pornhub, and Facebook. The US is now working on depriving Russians of McDonald's and Coca-Cola. If they keep on going with these sanctions, Russians will soon be among the healthiest, well-adjusted, and best-informed people on the planet. So that is the same thing again, isn't it? It's like these brands are... Is it signaling? They call it virtue signaling, don't they? If it's about kind of policies of gender or those kinds of things. Is it just signaling? Is it really? And that's all marketing does, is signal. Do you know what I mean? That's maybe why this is...
the bottom line, it's your identity. And so, if I walk into a bar, if people go, oh, classic Melanie,
yes,
depending on how I behave when I'm in there,
yes,
then, whatever the brand is, say it was Nike, classic Nike, that's what successful response means.
yes.
So, I think it's just understanding your own values and your own identity and beliefs as a brand, and examining those against the crisis in front of you at the time that it happens, and then thinking what would classic my brand say, do, behave, think, feel, act in this situation. So then it can get caught up in who you consult then becomes important.
Yes.
Because I think, Richard Branson's, I think, a great example of classic Virgin. You sort of see what the brand Virgin, not Richard himself, but the brand, what that brand, how it behaves. It's not like they're flawless and never make an error, but it's very clear, got a clear vision about providing a good experience from start to finish for the customer.
Yes.
And
it was interesting. I can't remember what the event was, but there was an event where something happened to do with airlines, and Lord knows, it must have been 25 years ago. But he turned up and he recorded the message for the customer service centers. Do you know what I mean? So he's always been, I don't know so much now, he must be really old now, but he's always kind of taken a real personal responsibility and, stepped up to the plate, and he's always been pretty good at reading the room. I think you're right. I think, but this is just good marketing again. Do you know what I mean? It's like good marketing is about being close and having the ear and understanding your market. You know, that's what it is. It's like, is kind of knowing, is being the person who can stand up at an event and say the thing that people want to hear. Do you know what I mean? Whatever the event is, if it's a funeral or a wedding or whatever it is, it's that kind of reading the room, I suppose, is what it is.
Well, and also being yourself, being authentic in that
Yeah, but
in
being
that
authentic is such hard work, isn't it?
oh yes. But I think if you have those that do it really successfully, that have got um, their identity down,
Yes.
that they can kind of say, like, I mean, look at Ricky Gervais. I think he's worried about what they think in the Golden Globes. He's always saying, like, it's classic Ricky Gervais, no matter where he's
Yes,
standing.
yes, yes.
He's not going to suddenly become politically correct,
Yes.
because it would not be authentic. So, but then his audience is not the winners of Golden Globes. That's not his target audience
Yes.
necessarily. So he to your point, he's reading the room. His room is not the people standing in front of him at the Golden Globes. His
No.
room is the viewers at home. But he's so I think whoever you are, it's understanding. But it did make me think about this emergency response from the community and what that like if I was Carlsberg, for example. This is where it can go terribly wrong. So Carlsberg have all this campaign about if Carlsberg did, whatever the thing, and it ends up being the best thing in the world, the best you've
Yes.
ever seen, whether it's an event, a wedding, a this or that, the other. And then, of course, they're saying our beer is the best in the world. We just decided to do beer, but whatever we do is the best in the world. So if they tried to muscle in on disaster response and help out, and said we're going to do the best disaster response in the world, they'd be just laughed out of town, and that would be, I think, a massive disaster in itself for them as a brand. So you have to choose where and when and how to respond and when to be silent.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're a marketer, you're signaling all the time. Do you know what I mean? So then the issue becomes if something important is happening and you're not acknowledging it or signaling it. And this is kind of what's happened because of the social media age. We've all been convinced as marketers we need to be media people. Do you know what I mean? We're doing this now. So it's like, how can we not acknowledge what's going on in Ukraine? And how can we not acknowledge what's going on in Australia? And yeah, so I think that's the danger. Do you know about Ratner? Do you know about Ratner's the Jewelers in the UK? So this is the archetypal failure of a brand story where Ratner had these jewelry shops all the way across the UK and they did cheap jewelry. And he was on the speaking circuit and he used to make jokes about the jewelry. So one of the things was they make something like a cocktail thing. I don't know, an artificial jewelry type cocktail thing where your butler can pour you these things and it only costs £2.50. Or you could buy yourself a pair of earrings that cost less than a Marks and Spencer's prawn sandwich, but probably won't last as long. And he made this joke on the speaking circuit. And then one time there was a journalist heard this and reported it in the Daily Mail or the Sun or something. And then Ratner's was finished as a business. Everyone knew it was cheap jewelry. But when he was exposed for making fun in front of his very wealthy, it might have been at the House of Lords or something, this speech, in front of his very wealthy friends, people would not tolerate that. So there is something about brands or brand marketing where a lot of the effort and the energy is brand protection, is just looking after it and making sure it doesn't get broken. Because once you are an entity in people's minds, that's something that could be broken. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, so I think it's a nightmare. I think it's a tightrope that marketers walk now because you have to be seen as edgy and fun and all of this sort of stuff. And then you're cancelled, which is exactly not the point of marketing.
It's a relationship. So if you're in a marriage, you've got to make it fresh every day, like bread. Just because you said I love you and I'm going to exchange rings and now I'm married doesn't mean that that's it. Divorce
Yes.
is possible. So it's only that you remain married because you're continuing to be a surprising delight to your partner, and vice versa, that you're allowing that. So with your customer, I think it's a relationship, and you've got to keep working at relationships for them to be successful. I don't think it's, and so I think that's normal. I think that's always been the way. It's just that things have gotten faster. We can more quickly leave our partner and swipe right and choose someone else. We
100%.
can
Yeah.
more quickly change brands. And so earning the right to have a long-term relationship with loyalty and all of that, it's very similar to how a marriage works or a long-term relationship would work.
Yes.
It is something you've got to work on and respond and say sorry and all of those things. But I think bottom line being, what's my values, who am I, and how, and apologize if I mess up, and all of those things, like Volkswagen did, I think, pretty successfully. So, with their emissions scandal, it's how you respond when that trust is broken, what you do, how you communicate. It's really interesting watching Bill and Melinda Gates as they've gone through their divorce, and how they speak about each other and how they speak about the organizations that they share. So they're maintaining the dignity of the mission and the values of the organizations that they're representing, despite what so it seems to me it's very shaky time when the premise was where that these two people were married and this is a power couple, and then is she going to kiss and tell and say throw Bill under a bus or vice versa? But no, it's actually that they are, no matter what they've been through, they're quite united for mutual benefit, I'm sure, to
And respectful of each other.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then
absolutely.
the other, where it's not going quite so well for a power couple, might be the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle thing, where they're not doing so well. But then that's a great example where anyone who loves them thinks everything they do is amazing, and anyone who isn't in adoration of them doesn't think it's amazing. Do you know what I mean? So it reminds me of, I did a stand-up comedy course. I did a little bit of stand-up comedy. And I was told, you don't do politics jokes and you don't do gender jokes unless you're a genius. Because essentially what you're doing is splitting the room right the way down the middle. And you don't want to do that. You want to have more than half the people laughing all the time. So you just don't go anywhere near that unless you're 100% sure you've got it exactly right and it's going to appeal to everyone. And it seems to me that maybe that's kind of the job. That's why it astounds me that M&Ms would go woke, because half the world are very excited about wokeness and the other half are not very excited about wokeness. So what they have potentially done is split their market, because not everyone who's excited about liberal values, very liberal values, is going to eat chocolate, and not everyone who's not doesn't eat chocolate. So it's difficult. But what I'm going to commend you for is your what was the word? Consistency, because that was a typical male response. Because one of the first few times I met you in 2006, you stood up and gave a presentation about how marketing is a bit like dating, is a bit like relationships. So there
Yeah, I
you
remember.
go. So that is a very
It was on
Melanie Farmer
Valentine's Day.
response. What was that?
It was. I gave that talk on Valentine's Day. I remember you coming up afterwards,
So
and
Mel, of
it was.
course, perfectly relevant, perfectly valid, exactly the right day, exactly the right response. You should be in
And I
marketing.
remember. I remember saying it at the talk. Some of you in this room may be looking forward to an exciting Valentine's Day dinner. Others might be ready to celebrate your divorce. Others are somewhere in between. So, in terms of that room, just because it's Valentine's Day doesn't mean that we're all really feeling romantic and happy about that.
Yes.
And so I remember sort of just making sure, and then it was all like girls who like boys and boys who like girls, and so forth. permutations. But yeah, but it is. Sales is like dating.
Yeah. So I think what I'm taking away from this story is it seems like we are constantly now in a disaster response situation. And so marketers need to get better. And so marketers need to do what they've always needed to do, which is understand their market better and better and better, and be consistently the thing that people need in these completely unpredictable situations. That's what needs to go on. Good. Great first story. Great start to the Mel on the Effective Marketing News show. Okay, shall we go to my story? Which story are we going to? Let's go to keep it kind of, this is why it fails. Oh, it does fail. I can't do it. Okay, I'm going to read you the headline. I can't show it to you. Okay, so how does your social media use impact the planet? Use this calculator to find out. Couldn't actually find the calculator. What they're saying is people are using their phones hundreds of times a day. That's what's going on. They analysed 10 of the most popular social media platforms and found that using TikTok generates the most emissions per minute of use at 2.63 grams of carbon dioxide, followed by Reddit, 2.45 grams of carbon dioxide, Pinterest, 1.3 grams. Using YouTube, in contrast, is just responsible for 0.46 grams of CO2 per minute. So, social media... So what this is about, clearly, is that none of these social media are existing in a vacuum. As far as we have come along the anti-carbon movement, we are still a carbon-fueled society. And these platforms are fueled by huge warehouses filled with huge computers, which generate huge amounts or consume huge amounts of carbon energy. So there was a thing that was clearly a lie. Okay, if you spend, let's remember that TikTok is Chinese, so there might be a little bit of, innate racism going on here as well. And this is a Western publication. Maybe they are pro-Western social medias. I don't know. So if you spend all your time on TikTok, the fastest growing social media platform, the carbon footprint would be different. 145 minutes on TikTok causes nearly 140 kilograms of carbon emissions, which would be like driving a standard car for more than 350 miles. Now, I'm astounded. How can spending 145 minutes?
Minutes, okay. Yeah,
it can't be true, can it? It cannot be true. So
yeah, go on.
So what's the speed limit in? So the speed limit in the UK is 70 miles an hour. So 145 minutes. That's 2 hours of driving. So if you spend an extra hour looking at your phone, essentially, that's like moving a ton of metal. 350 miles. So 70 divided by 350, it's 270 is 3. It's 4 hours of moving a ton of metal. Is comparable to you looking at your phone for an hour and 45 minutes looking at TikToks. I don't know how they calculate this or anything. I don't even know if it's a serious thing. That clearly has to be a lie.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Mrktg are doing a quite extraordinary job, I think, of measuring carbon emissions for every purchase that you make. But then it comes back to transparency of the supply chain. So I wonder with this, what are they actually measuring that TikTok are doing every time you're doing? Is it the fact that if you stick something on TikTok, the number of people who might then, so because are you posting or just consuming? If you post on TikTok, then you're now attracting, let's say, 1 million people to come and look at that TikTok that you've posted. All of those people are turning the phone on, especially, and using energy, having to then later charge their phone because they've spent all this time looking at the thing that you posted on TikTok. So I would imagine that they're considering the fact that if you're on TikTok for 145 minutes, some of that time you're sharing posts, you're posting, you're encouraging others to engage. with it, and then so that all of those other people's engagement would be because of you. And so maybe, we don't know,
we
they're
don't know.
attributing all.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me like, compared to owning a dog or eating meat, it's nothing. It's going to make no difference. In fact, there's some really interesting stats about airlines and what they've done. They took one olive out of every salad and saved something like $40,000 to start with, but reduced emissions significantly over a year from airplanes, because the weight of the olives, every gram off that plane. In fact, even I think it was in China. I might have that wrong. There's an airline that requested that passengers urinate before they get on the plane, because the amount of urine contained inside individuals on the plane was an amount of weight that was that was causing them to have to burn that extra bit of fuel to get safely to the other end, right? So if everyone urinated before they got on the plane, then that's quite a number of liters of liquid that they're not having to use fuel to get it. So I'm thinking, comparatively, it's just almost, to me, sounds like a way for social media to be in the conversation, but for no reason. It's so minuscule. Yeah. I mean, what really are you going to save the planet by changing social media platforms?
Okay, but now we're going to a deeper question also, which is, are we actually going to change the planet? And is it just virtue signaling again? There is no doubt these huge data centers are burning huge amounts of energy. There is absolutely no doubt, and it's 24/7. And it's the same with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin mining that goes on. And it's the same with, so I mean, this goes to a deeper argument, which is, it almost seems like it doesn't matter what we try, nothing is effectively going to work. Do you know what I mean? Because the alternative then ends up being as, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into I wanted to say about Leonardo DiCaprio, because he really annoys me that he's like this international face of environmentalism or anti-global warming. And then he spends his holidays chugging around the Caribbean in a yacht that is, would carry 500 people between islands if it weren't a luxury yacht. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. There's something, again, like, we're not very far away from this, also this hypocrisy, and how accepted it is. It's just like, oh yeah, well, clearly he's a hypocrite. So what? He's Leonardo DiCaprio. He's getting away with it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel about it. I don't know if that's relevant to what we're saying here.
And I wonder, notwithstanding the small amounts of emissions per minute that you're tweeting or on Reddit or whatever, I wonder if there's a message about responsibility for the sector. And I'm struggling to really care, I'll be honest, about like the actual difference that's going to make.
You're the perfect replacement for Ionut, because this is quite often his response is, I don't care about the news story that you bought. But
is it a message? Is it a wake-up call to the sector to be responsible ourselves? I don't know. And I wonder.
Yeah, do you know Bill Maher? He's an American talk show host.
Yeah.
And he recently did so it goes back to your stat, 70% don't want to work for a company unless they're visibly sustainable. And transparently sustainable. And it goes back to that. So he did a thing recently where he was comparing Greta Thunberg to one of these Kardashians. And the Kardashian has, tens of millions of people following them on TikTok, but is clearly burning a lot of carbon, where Greta Thunberg has much less. So how much of this is signaling and how much of it is real, I don't really know. How much of this is just filling pages? How much of this is because that's the other thing also, is how much of this are we saying just because, people are searching for it, so we have to say something about it. So, I
Well,
don't.
people are looking for fresh content. So
Yes.
if I were a social media writer, commentator, and so on, who have we not compared? We've compared car manufacturers, we've compared banks, so it's bound to happen that someone's going to say, well, we haven't compared social media platforms.
Yeah. But also then, is that what it's about? Is it about the carbon cost? Is it about the environmental costs? I mean, I don't know where all of this data has come from.
Was this in 2020?
This is now. This was March the 8th, 2022.
Things you can do. What this is, slacktivism. Slacktivism, where you sit on your sofa and change your flag to Ukrainian and do nothing.
Yes.
So no disrespect to people who are doing that and feeling overwhelmed and wanting to signal that they care and they are united with the Ukrainians. But there's a difference between that and, and actually, I don't know whether the people are all donating and doing what we're actually doing. So perhaps this is a way to feel that I'm doing something because I've ditched TikTok and gone I only use YouTube or whatever.
Yes, yeah, well, they are saying, I mean, I think maybe this is just a piece about we need to put something on about the climate. Like, okay, so here we go. Have climate anxiety. Here are 7 things you can do, like stop using TikTok or whatever. So there is something here about inducing anxiety, which this clearly does, which then helps. I don't know if this is an advertiser, but they're also saying here that Facebook also uses, the whole digital thing is, I think, quite damaging to the environment. And I've got issues with the environment and the global warming thing, because I don't think that's the most immediate environmental catastrophe. Like, there are millions of people dying every year from water pollution and air pollution and all these things. But because global climate change has better PR, it gets more. Those things get less attention than they should. That's kind of what I think. So, yeah, it's kind of dangerous territory to be in.
Well, we certainly have a few participants who do climate risk and so on in our program on Friday, and some of that is. I mean, looking at flood's gone from 40 billion to 80 billion in 2 years in payouts. So the insurance industry, you can imagine, is not wild about that. So you could just look at flood and, but all the things that you mentioned in terms of pollution, all of these things are part of the system that is not helping us.
Yes.
So, I guess they are in the mix, that, and even just how we build things is contributing to heat, which is causing additional pollution in terms of, what happens to a building when it's really hot.
Yes.
And the gases that, what happens to that. Yeah.
Yes. So the thing is, it is all part and parcel of the same thing. But I think the most immediate, for me, I would prioritize the lives of children in the developing world who die from water pollution or air pollution over the losses of Australian insurance companies. Personally, that's where my values are. And I don't necessarily want to get into this because, I don't necessarily want to get into it, but just seems to me that there's just so much hypocrisy going on and so much signaling going on. And yeah, I just wonder how much of that is that and not actually real, Okay, cool. That's my second story. Yeah. Shall we go to your second story? Are we out of time? We're out of time, are we?
Are we out of time? Well, I do have to get on to something. I'm running a couple of things tomorrow, but we can do quick and dirty on mine.
Okay, cool. Let's go quick and dirty on yours.
Yeah, because they were kind of related. So the future skills, I was just talking about neuroscience and how understanding people's drivers and behavior change. And what I have observed is that there are more and more roles and or projects around neuroscience across the board, and certainly in marketing world. So I'm seeing more jobs advertised, looking for people who understand neuroscience, and partly it's that marketers are getting skilled up in that area. We've always had some level of understanding of psychology, so it's really not far from that, and influence and persuasion. But I'm seeing a lot more that the word neuroscience in these are the things we're looking for in the applicant. So, and I think what it is actually understanding our actual behaviour rather than what we say we're going to do on a survey. And so, of course, there's been ethnographic research happening over many years versus just doing a survey. So observing customers in the wild, if you like, and seeing what they do and how they behave. But I think now it's not so much just observing them, but actually predicting and understanding how the brain works and what triggers safety and what triggers unsafety, what triggers a feeling of risk. And so intentionally designing our retail experiences, for example, around safety and comfort, and especially I think it's relevant now in retail if you're trying to get people to leave their house and come to your shop when I can just buy it online. But also, how do I create and build trust and safety and understand what's going on in people's brains and what's going to create safety. So there's the chemicals, the basic chemicals of dopamine and so on that will help me to buy. You start giving me dopamine by gamifying the purchase experience, and it's pretty hard for me not to start buying things. So, but it's understanding those chemicals, and I think it's interesting because I've heard people say the best psychologists in the world are working for games development companies because they know how to create dopamine at the right levels at the right time. Now, I kind of secretly think, well, are they the best or are they the worst? Because there's all this addiction that's happening.
Yes.
In that space. So there you go. I'll plant that seed. So, you've got dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin. So the chemical cocktail and how we use it / abuse it. Abusing it.
Okay, so all I want to say about that is the best or worst, the best academically, morally worst psychologists in the world might be working for these digital companies because what they're expert at is building these dependent relationships, I think, and it horrifies me. Yeah, whether that's dopamine or whatever it is, whatever the chemical combination might be, they are expert at developing those dependent relationships and making people dependent on them. And I think the whole thing towards neuroscience has gone beyond, like in the last 20 years, we've spoken quite happily, warmly about influence and persuasion and all these things. But now it's going to a mass level because they've got these windows right into our actual current activity and response. And oh my God, it's just frightening. Now we've got these devices. So now, they're going to know when our heart rate goes up, when we get moody, when we get buy-y, so horrifying. Good. What was your last story? Do you want to get your last story done?
Yeah, I guess Facebook. Yeah, Facebook, I just sort of wanted to comment on, so if they're falling off a cliff, what's interesting to me is that their audience, they have twice as many users in India than they do in the USA. So their market is actually, is it the US? Is it the West at all? That they have, and it's interesting to me because I think, and now I'm forgetting the name of the platform in India. You might know it. That was bigger than Facebook for many, many years. But it's men in their 30s in India. That's where their biggest market is. And so they've got 329 million users versus, say, Germany, 25 million. So I do, and now I'm not. I think that's interesting with India now starting to get a good middle class going. Like as India starts to kind of mature, that's the market. 329 million users. That's not bad. And if January this year they had overall 3.2 billion users, so India's a large chunk of that. And that's already 3 times what TikTok have. Although TikTok have gone up and up and up. So
Yes.
TikTok with 1 billion users, they're number 6. But they came out of nowhere, just like Facebook.
Yes.
It's one way of putting it out, coming out of nowhere. I think the fact that I think you've mentioned that they've made an appearance in Zuckerberg's speeches, and they would if they were rising the ranks quickly. So number 6, but their users are really quite young, like typically under 20. So are those users wealthy? Because they're only just starting to tip over into the profit. So it's just when those users start to grow up and have money, right? Have serious money. Whereas in Facebook land, we're kind of now having people who grow up with it in the large silver surfer market, like my mum, and Facebook Marketplace, which is really taking off for those who don't have Amazon working quite as nicely as it is in other countries. And so I think that's just interesting. Is the statistically men in India in their 30s is their biggest market by user anyway.
And what's interesting about that is that also these tech giants have also got into the habit of employing male Indians as very senior executives in their business. Like the CEO, I think, of Google and Facebook right now are both male Indians. So that's interesting. And the point you make is the point that I would have made also, is what's the value of that market in India? And how does that compare to the value in the US? Okay, good, cool. Are we done here?
Yeah, that's
I've
me.
thoroughly enjoyed this. Maybe so. We're going to do this fortnightly, are we? So I'll get a calendar invite to you, and Is Tuesday or Wednesday the better day for you to do it? Because it goes up on a Thursday, is all.
Oh yeah, either day is good for me. You know, maybe a Tuesday for your benefit because you've got Wednesday to be recovering from whatever.
Yeah.
And
Wednesday is actually better for me because it's how long it takes me to transcribe these things. So Wednesdays is good. And if we aim for about this time, we've got a setup now that works, so we won't have to do that messing around at the beginning.
Yeah, webcam, laptop, done.
Maybe next time headphones would be really good.
I'll see what I can do. Because
a little bit echoey there.
Yeah, one of the good experience. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, super cool. You're an absolute legend. Thank you so much, Melanie.
That was awesome.
It was so cool.
And leave you with it, and good to talk. Good luck with your fortnight to come.
Super cool. You too. I will catch you in 2 weeks.
Hope you feel better soon.
I'm sure I will. Okay, cool.